Hi, everyone. Hi. I think we're gonna get this party started. Folks, that was amazing. So good. Folks are still coming in, and we'll welcome people as they come in, and if you can make space near you or help somebody feel like it's great to be here, as we move on our own timelines, as we should.
That's right. But like church, never stop from coming. Never stop from coming. It's okay.
Don't meet me there, beat me there. My name is Liz Lowe. I am the Associate Director of Kaleo Center for Faith, Justice, and Social Transformation. I use she, her, and her pronouns, and I want to begin by giving gratitude for the Dakota land that we are on, near the territory of the Ojibwe of the Anishinaabe, and to give thanks for all of the people who are native to this land who have stewarded this place and continue to steward this place where I am a visitor and where I call home. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kaleo Center. I'm going to ask you to give money to the Kaleo Center, and then I have the immense privilege of introducing Tonja. Does that sound like a good plan? Excellent. Kaleo, I love the audience participation. Bring it. Kaleo Center exists in the world at the intersection of justice and spiritual life. We work with people across diverse spiritual traditions and communities of faith to imagine and build and make a world of liberation. And we do that in a model of deep solidarity with frontline movements for justice and frontline struggles for justice that are led by brown, black, native, queer, and trans folks. We are housed at United Theological Seminary. We are in deep partnership with United Theological Seminary. United is a pro-LGBT, Christian-based, multi-faith seminary, really exploring what it can look like to be a faith leader in a world that's calling for justice. And it is wonderful to be able to imagine our work in partnership with that home. Kaleo does its work in the world in three ways. And before I should say those three ways, something we're so clear about is that nothing we do is possible unless we end white supremacy. That nothing we do is possible unless we end colonization and patriarchy and the violence of capitalism. But we don't actually have a plan to end those things by ourselves. So we build a community that can imagine building and making and doing those things. And our role is that it's a convener and nurturing space for that community. So the way we do that is in three ways. We train leaders from across faith traditions and spiritual practices in the skills of social transformation. We work nationally to build a field of justice-based social transformation within seminary education, within the training of faith leaders across denominations and communities. And then third, we work in community to bring people together and into relationship, and then into practices of action and solidarity, so that we can show up usefully to movements that are leading the way. I would love to talk to any of you at any time about Kaleo and how to be involved in that work, but you're already part of it by being here, and that is a gorgeous thing. Now is the time when I get to ask you for money. And it's funny, so much of what I do in the world gets to be talking to people about how do we build collective resources for work that is audacious and necessary without reproducing the extractive relationships that make capitalism so dehumanizing. I don't have a perfect answer. But what I always tell people is that the best you can do is show up and know that the relationship of inviting somebody into acting meaningfully on their values is the thing that matters. Whether or not you give money is just about what you have to give and what you might not have to give in a system that is not resourcing all of us in fair ways, that is not acknowledging our labor or our land or our bodies in full ways, and that goes especially for Native folks and folks of color who have gotten royally screwed. So, my job then is to deepen somehow our relationship in the way that I ask you to financially contribute, and in a way that's separate from who has what and who can give what. And the best way I know to do that is to, in the moment of speaking, tell the truth, whatever that truth is in the moment, about why this work matters to me. And today, the most true thing I can tell you is that my wife and I are in the process of trying to make a baby. And it's been a really up and down process. We just went through a miscarriage and an early pregnancy, which I assume has happened to many people in this room. And it's just part of what happens when you're imagining making a life. And so as I have been through in my body now, feeling what pregnancy could be and then feeling it go, the thing that has been so clear to me and so sustaining and certain to me is that the best thing I could give a child or any child is the knowing of this community. That is like my inheritance. The gift I know I can give is this community. And we build that together. We build it every day. We build it in the way we say hello. We build it in the way we fight for justice. And so my life is so honored to be here with you. And that is why I am asking you to give financially to Kaleo. And that might sound like a weird bait and switch, but it's not. It is just the truth. That's the only reason I can, in the midst of the complexity of the violence of capitalism, with any integrity, ask you to do that. So you have an envelope on your chair. Please take it out. And consider, is there an amount I can give today so that this work can happen? That could be a one-time gift of any amount. It could mean becoming a sustaining donor with a recurring monthly gift of any amount. And whether you give or not, thank you so much for making this work possible, for making the community I can imagine for a child possible, and for all our children. And if you are able to make a gift, there is a basket. It's the part I always forget. Now it is my joy to introduce Tonja. Tonja Honsey is that how I pronounce your last name? Thank you. Is an Indigenous woman, a revolutionary mother, an organizer of awesomeness. I cannot even begin to name the number of organizations and coalitions and projects that Tonja has led in such a heart-centered and community-centered way. She is imagining a world without incarceration, and she's doing more than imagining it. She is organizing all of us to make it possible. And I am in, and I hope all of you are too. So I'll let Tonja say more about herself and her work, but it is just I am brimmed with gratitude that we get to be here together today and that you are someone I get to call a comrade and friend. So thank you so much. Come on up.
Can you guys hear me if I don't use this?
Yes.
Because it's really odd.
We ask folks to use the microphone.
I will use my regardless. All right. I'm going to sit down though, so I'm going to start by introducing myself a little bit, and then I would like everybody else to go around and just say who you are, your pronouns if you feel comfortable, and an ancestor that you'd like to bring into this space. And that if you do not feel comfortable with that, that's fine, you can pass. But I will start, and then we'll go to my left because we always lead with the heart. My name is Tonja. I use she, hers. And I'm going to bring Michelle, who was my best friend who died of an overdose almost 17 years ago, into this space with me today.
John Anthony. I'm an ordained Baptist minister, born in Bermuda. And I would like to bring both my father and my grandfather, who both committed suicide.
Bill Peaches, lived in Dakota country all my life, and Pearl Sylvester Walters would like to be with us.
Shelley Diaz, my ex-band member, live in the urban area, and I'd like to bring my little brother who just passed away, and my older sister who died when I was young, but she got me started with activism.
My name is Ben Connolly. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I'll bring an ancestor from my spiritual lineage, Miaozong, great Zen nun from China, 1100 years ago.
I'm Chelsea. I work for Cleo. I use she, her pronouns. And I'll bring my grandma Judy.
I'm Bianca, she, her pronouns, and I'm going to bring in Lucy, who gave me unconditional love as a child.
My name is Jody, and I'd like to have my granny Olivia.
I'm Evelyn, and I'm not quite sure which ancestor wants to be with me today, so I'll figure it out. I'm Allison Doe, and I'd like to bring in my grandfather, John Lennon.
I'm Jess English Kittleman. I use they, them, and I would like to bring my father's mother into the room today, and I don't know her name because it was taken from her.
My name is Dave Matarazzo. I go by him, and I will bring my grandparents on both sides.
I'm Jane Kirby.
I would bring my friend Tom Taylor, who was an activist in our community, who was my really good buddy, and he would be here with us if we were living.
I'm Deirdre. I don't necessarily identify gender-wise, and I would like to bring my ancestors who were colonizers in the room, because it's my job to be here now.
Debbie Wyman, pronouns she, her, and I am going to bring my dad because this would be really good for him.
Tanisha Snotty, she, her pronouns. I'm not sure who I bring into this space. So. Jessica, she, her. I'm going to bring my grandma, Bessie Berkowitz.
Hi, my name's Lily Bennett. I use she, her pronouns. I would like to bring my aunt Paula and my namesake Lily into the room.
Anna, she, her, and I'll bring my mother, Barbara Salem.
Meg, she, her, hers. I bring the birth mother of my adopted child, whose name I don't know, and all the birth mothers whose names we don't know, who gave up their kids for economic reasons.
July, she, her, hers, and I bring curiosity about how long ago there were lives and living ancestors in my family.
My name is Kirsten, she, her, and I bring my brother Kenneth and a friend, Jackie Lewis, that just passed.
My name is Emily Goldfries, and she, her, hers, and I bring my grandpa Gigi because I wish I could talk to him about these things now. He was a Presbyterian campus chaplain from World War II through the 80s.
Wow.
I'm Kristen Gilbert. I use she, her, hers, and I would like to bring my grandma Miko. I'm Jenna. I use she, her, hers, and I'm not sure.
I'm Shafi, they, them, and I bring my aunt Amy Jesus.
My name is Mary Jean, and I use she, her, hers. And I bring my Italian grandmother, who as a teenager was a migrant worker, having to travel from home to the Coal Valley in Italy harvesting rice, where she contracted malaria.
I'm Nance, I go by they, them, and I'm going to bring an ancestor from the Middle Ages in Europe who was a witch.
I'm Catherine, and I use she, her, and I'll bring in Lucille Wilson. She was the mother of Diane Wilson from the Dakota.
I'm Vivian, I use she, her, hers. I'm going to bring in my great-grandmother, who I never met, but she taught me she crystallized intersectionality. She was born into caste privilege, but married at 9, illiterate, very irreverent, And very much an activist who raised my mother, who raised me. I'm Stephanie. I identify with she and hers. And I would like to bring my grandmother and my father into the room with me and think about healing through generation. Miss Adams, she and hers. I would bring Connie and Janelle to the room.
I'm Kyle. I identify with she, her, and hers, and I'd like to bring my godmother, Mary Swanson.
I'm Felicia. I use she, her pronouns, and I would like to bring my grandma, Papa, who passed away last year. My name is Maureen. I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to bring my grandmother, Linda, because I wouldn't be in the U.S. without her. Sue Allers, Kathy, she, her, hers. I'd like to bring Mommy Fable. Mommy takes care of her.
My name's Nick Tannen, Ethan. I would bring my Uncle David.
My name is Micah, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I bring my shape and each will be bringing my Jaji with me.
My name is Jane, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I would just bring my Celtic ancestors who had a really good understanding of Christian tradition and holding to connect with them.
Morning. Well, my name is Sierra, and I use she, her, hers, and I'm inviting my two great-grandmothers from
I'm Anne Kirk, and I use she, her, hers. I would also bring Irish grandfather and big face.
I'm Sarah. Identifies she, her, hers, and I would like to bring my brother John.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I use they, them pronouns, and I'll bring my grandmother distinguished.
Rebecca, I use she, her, and bringing my grandmother Helen.
I'm Ashley, I use she, her. I think I'll bring my father's father, who I never knew, and who is not spoken about in my family, but what I do know is that he had a long-standing battle with mental illness, a lot of fear around that.
My name is Rocky. When I talk about myself in the third person, I use she or her, so you can use whatever you want. And I want to invite a friend in place to come to this dear friend who left us too soon, and I really miss partying with them and raising trouble with them.
I'm Velma, and I use she, her, and I will bring my grandmother Pearl, who was an activist in her own way, working with prohibition.
My name's Molly. I use she and they, and I'm processing too much anger with my ancestors.
Hi, I'm Steve Nickham, and I'm bringing my grandmother Hazel.
And I'm Liz again, she and hers. I'd like to bring my mother's mother, Charlotte Goldman, who taught me that as a Jew, I should be a communist. And as a political ancestor, as someone who shaped me as a queer Jew, and also a communist, Leslie Feinberg. Leslie Feinberg.
My name is Marie, and I would like to bring the miscarried and the very short-lived toddlers of ancestry.
Did we miss anybody else, or is there anybody else that came in a little bit late? All right. Well, thank you. I just want to say why I have start with that. My ancestors, and I didn't have a way to connect with that for most of my life. I've never had roots. When I thought of family, there was a lot of pain and anger and hurt and trauma. Part of my journey for healing is to find those roots wherever I can. Wherever feels right for me and is nourishing to my soul and to my spirit. So sometimes, you know, we can bring in Malcolm X, if that's who we connect with. We can bring in Dennis Banks, if that's who we connect with. We can bring in, you know, a pet, if that's who we connect with. Ancestors in our Star Nation are anybody that's passed on, any being that's passed on. And I like to do that to bring in my roots and ground me and just ground the room, because there's so much. Did you hear all the wisdom? Imagine all the wisdom that's been brought into this room, and it's knowledge. I had no idea that there was going to be this many people here. I feel a little bamboozled, but I'm okay with it. I have an 18-year-old, and I told him this morning, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to say. He's like, I'm supposed to speak for the song. He goes, well, it's a good thing you don't mind talking, Mom. All right, you always got something to say. Well, I guess I do. So I just want to open this space up for everybody. Like I said, we all have so much knowledge in this space. And it's not just one person that holds this knowledge. I think that that's a real colonized way of even just having conversation. We need to open the space up and just make it so there's no time to wait for questions, or if you have something to say, please say, because that's what we need to move into, right? I'll tell you a little bit about myself and where I come from and the things that I'm doing now, and then we'll start to talk a little bit more about that. Again, I am Tonja. I am an Indigenous woman of mixed blood. I am a revolutionary mother of 3 boys. I have a 24-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
God help me.
He comes from the stars. My 4-year-old comes from the stars and reminds me that every day. We were driving last night. I was doing a training for an organization, and he comes with me, and we were leaving, and I had another co-worker with me that was co-presenting with me, and my son looks up to the moon, and that's his grandmother, and there's my grandmama Moon. And so he speaks to her, and we have birthday parties and other parties because he wants to make sure, under the stars, because he wants to make sure his grandma Moon can be there with him, and she doesn't miss out. And so every day he's teaching me. And he's taught me more than I could have ever imagined about myself, about the world, about organizing, about just, if he doesn't know it, he'll make it up and tell me. So that is River. I'm an incarceration survivor. I'm a sexual assault survivor, a domestic assault survivor, a capitalism survivor, an organizing survivor. We grew up very poor, and my grandfather was not a nice person, and everybody knew that my grandfather was not a nice person, and so I was judged on who my grandfather was. I remember being very young. We had an older couple that lived a couple blocks down, and they used to invite all the kids in, and they would play violin. He would play violin, and there was treats, and everybody used to come over, and we would go there all the time until he found out who my grandfather was, and then we weren't allowed. Me and my sister were not allowed in the house anymore. And I remember that feeling of, well, he's not even. We don't even call him Grandpa because he's not a part of us. I also remember around the same time my mom having a mental breakdown because of the years of sexual assault that he implemented on her and violence, and feeling so on the outside, and the fear of not knowing what was going on with my mom because she just screamed anytime that anybody got close to the door, and thinking that she was dying. And knowing that he had hurt her, and he hurt her bad, but not understanding what that meant at the time. I knew how he was hurting me when he was with me. I was molested from when I was 4 until I was 12 by him. And so we see the cycles in the intergenerational violence that happens to women. And when I was 12 years old, because of all of the things that I was going through, I was acting out. And the court decided that because we were too poor, my parents were too poor to pay for me to be put in a placement, that my parents needed to give me up as a ward of the state. So from 12 on, I was a ward of the state. My mom had her own mental health issues, which took lots and lots of years for me to heal from. And so when I was home and there was violence in the home, my dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and my mom had a lot of mental health issues. And when I would leave the house to survive, she would call the police on me, and I'd be picked up as a run risk or a runaway. And because I was a ward of the state, that was against the law. So by the time I was 14, I received my prisoner ID number. I spent 6 months in solitary confinement because I was a run risk from running away from an abusive home. And when I would get out, the only way I knew how to survive was to sell drugs. It was either to sell my body or to sell drugs. And I didn't connect with my body, so I wasn't going to connect with anybody else. And so that's how I survived. I sold drugs. I took drugs to survive my trauma. When I was 16, I got pregnant. I stopped using drugs, and I remember speaking to my son in my belly, saying that I would never let my demons hurt him. It took a lot of years because I didn't know how to live, to be able to forgive myself for that. And it's still a process. But I still tried to be the best mom that I could be, and the only way I knew how to do that was to sell drugs. And because of where I was at was a small town, there wasn't industry there. But everybody knew me in the town, so it was a little bit like selling drugs in the middle of, a small town with a sign on it. I'm selling drugs. How else am I getting this money, right? Didn't think that one through very well. So I continued to go in and out of being incarcerated. I made choices because I wanted a family. I'd never had a family. I didn't even know what that meant. So I would make choices and I would settle for people that I thought could be my family. I put myself in situations where I was almost killed by partners that were supposed to love me, where I had knives held up to my throat with my son in the other room, trying to be quiet so he wouldn't be scared, where I had people who were my friends come to kill this person. They had to hide me out in an undisclosed house for 3 weeks before, in this very small town, I couldn't leave the house. I remember at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, I'm gonna go walk to my car. This is enough. I haven't been outside, and so I was like, all right. And they're like, are you sure? I was like, it's been 3 weeks. I haven't seen, nobody knows, he has no idea that I'm here. I remember walking outside to my car and walking back and hearing, and looking over, and here was his car. He jumped the curb to try to hit me. And I knew at that point that there was a mark on my body and on my soul, and it was much bigger than just a person after me. I continued to try to get sober throughout that time, and to just, but I didn't know how. It hurt so bad. I remember being curled up in fetal positions because my heart hurt so bad. To breathe hurt so bad. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to change. I knew that there was something bigger. I knew that I was supposed to be doing something, and my boy, one child at that time, was so important to me, but I felt like everything I touched went to shit. Just so you know, I'm going to probably cuss through this, so I apologize up front. I ended up leaving Minnesota and thought, because I was selling entirely too many drugs and was almost dead. And so I left with someone that I knew was abusive. It was not a good situation, and I got pregnant again. And I was like, okay, I'm sober. It's going to be good. I was the problem. Now I'm going to get a job. I'm going to have a real life. I'm going to have a house, and everything's going to be great. And once I got pregnant, it went terribly wrong. And he continued to drink, and I continued to become a puddle of myself, trying to figure out how I was going to make a family out of this mess. I had my second son, True, and I ended up leaving because it got so bad, and I came back to Minnesota, and he came back and followed me, and he wanted me to be with him. I've been sober for a year at that time, maybe a little bit longer. And I remember him looking at me saying, "Do you ever just miss getting high?" I said, "I don't." And so he pulled out a gram, and he was like, "Are you sure you don't miss getting high?" And the next day I was manufacturing meth, literally. Because that was, okay, I'm back to doing this. This is where I'm at. I was never a casual user in my life. It wasn't even about using, it was about selling for me, because that empowered me. I can provide, I can get a home, I can have cars, I can have houses, I can have things, I can buy things for my children. I can not struggle the way that I was before. I ended up calling him maybe a year later, begging him to help me get out of where I was at. And he continued to call me throughout this time and tell me that I should just kill myself, and what's wrong with you, and you're a terrible mother, and I called him one night and I said, it's something bad's gonna happen. I need help. Can you come and pick me up? I'll go with you. I'll go back with you. I just need to be with my son. Can you just come pick me up? And he hung the phone up on me. And 2 days later, I was picked up for manufacturing methamphetamines, first-degree possession, first-degree attempt to sell, and fleeing an officer. And I sat in a jail cell with a $150,000 bail, looking at a minimum of 75 years. I was not caught with anything. I always say, it's a little embarrassing, but the connecting evidence was Hostess cupcake wrappers and Orange Crush cans at the scene and in my car. That's how ridiculous, right? And so needless to say, I do not look at a Hostess cupcake ever again. I see when I run. Like I said, I was there, and I was in a 4-person cell with 13 women. It was a holding cell. When I finally was moved out of there, that jail was deemed unfit for human inhabitants. I spent 12 months there with no court date. There was no windows to look out. There was no activity room. There was nothing. It was a room about from here to you, 4 cells. And then the common area was about this big. We had a shower, the door, 2 benches, and a phone. And the TV flipped on we had a garbage can that was flipped over, and a TV in the corner trying to get any station. And no lighting. It's a lot different than what we see now. But during that time, I was also coming off of massive amounts of methamphetamines, where I thought I was going to die. And I would go and put a kite in every week, asking to talk to someone, that I needed to get on some medications because I was extremely depressed, terrifyingly depressed. About 4 months down the road of them playing a game with me every week, I'd go in there like, yep, we'll send it off to the doctor. We'll send it off to the doctor. I finally stood up and said, I'm done. This is bullshit. You know you're not going to help me. But it's on record. So when I do kill myself, my parents and my kids are going to have a lawsuit against you. Because that's the only way I'm going to be able to help them. They brought me back to my cell, and about 15 minutes later, they pulled me back out. They brought me out into the booking area, and they stripped me naked, and they threw me into what they call a wet cell, which is nothing but a hole in the ground with nothing. I sat in there for 2 weeks until I would sign a piece of paper that says I was fine. If there's ever been a time that I have ever felt close to breaking, it was when they let me out. They finally let me use the phone, and I called my dad. My family wasn't the family to come and visit. They had it, right? Like, you do your thing, you did it, just, it's your deal to take care of. And I remember calling my dad, and it was the first time that I heard compassion in my dad's heart when I just called and I said, Dad, it's bad. It's bad here, and I don't know if I'm going to survive. And my dad was like, okay, what's going on? And I said, I can't talk on the phone. And so he came up to see me. It was the first time he came up to see me. They used to come in the middle of the night, the investigators would, and pull me out, set me in a room and tell me how the community and my children were safe now that I was locked away. I would not see my kids until they were college graduates, and how lucky they were that they were now free from me. And then they would go and throw me back into my cell, and I would be a puddle of myself and try to, okay, where am I going to get this hope from? Where am I going to get this hope from? I finally had to try to find something to focus on. Somebody brought in a book. It was just a very small little book, and it was called Happiness. And I was like, happiness? You have no fucking idea. Like, how am I, and it talked about, I remember reading and it said, no, it's just this one exact second. Happiness is not a minute away. It's finding it in this one, a piece in this 1 second, right here, right now. And I started thinking about that. And I started praying. I didn't know who I was praying to. I just know I did not want to be alone anymore. And so I would sit in my cell and I would talk out loud after lockdown. And I'd just be like, hey, what's up? Yeah, I've had a really shitty day, but I'm making it. How was yours? That's how I prayed. I had no idea how to pray. I just knew that I was going to be locked up for a long time, and I was so alone. And that alone feeling almost killed me. I would fall asleep with the sheet wrapped around my neck, praying for the guts to roll over. And I didn't know how to get from where I was. I didn't know how to find happiness. If they only knew, I was like, this book, if they only knew where I was sitting reading this book, and are you kidding me? Come on, happiness, like, this is bullshit. Like, it doesn't make any sense. My best friend, the one that I talked about that I brought in here, she couldn't bust me out of jail, so instead she busted into jail. She got picked up for driving after suspension and was like, take me to jail. Take me to jail. And they're like, but we'll just let you know I need to go to jail. And so Michelle came in, and she was my Janis Joplin. She was a hippie. She walked around with no shoes. I took care of her. I had to go bust down doors, hotel rooms to drag her out because she was in unsafe places. She was my person. And she busted in to see me. And they put her in my cell. She slept on the floor, and we sat up and we talked the entire night. And she told me that she was shooting heroin. And I remember thinking in my head, you gotta say something. But we'd made a pact that we were just going to be there for each other. And selfishly, I just said, I just need her right now. And I didn't say anything. 2 weeks later, she came up missing. And it was the first time in my life that I don't know who it was, what it was, but I was on my face in my room praying in some language I didn't even know, begging for her to be okay, begging for her pain to stop. For 3 days, sobbing. I didn't know what was going on. After 3 days, I got up and I was like, it's over. She was found dead. She had overdosed in someone's house, and they left her there for 5 days and didn't call the police. When they did call, they said she had an asthma attack. She left behind a little boy who's now a man, and a whole bunch of people that she didn't realize loved her so much. From that point, her sister-in-law was in jail with me, and she applied to go to the funeral, to get a furlough to go to the funeral. I'm like, they're not going to let me out. Like, there's no chance. The day of the funeral, I got a call to the booking room, and they're like, Tonja, do you want to go to Michelle's funeral? And I looked at them and I said, this isn't funny. Like, I can't do this. You can't say this. I don't do this to me. And they allowed me to go. They said, if you have three rules, you have to stay in the back, you have to keep your handcuffs on, and no touching anybody. People can't come up and touch you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Oh, every one of those were broke. When I got there, of course, everybody came running up because no one expected me to be there. I didn't expect to be there. And then I was back with the investigator, and I said, I'm going up to speak. And he was like, why more? I said, I'm going up to speak. And I went up to speak, and I read a poem that I'd written for her. And then I sang Mercedes-Benz by Janis Joplin, and the entire room sang along with us. And so when I bring her in here, she is my ancestor. She was my person. After that, things changed. She had me, and I was sentenced I had to do almost 5 months in Shakopee, and then I was sent to a diversion program, Teen Challenge. And I had to be there for 15 months. And I just I remember going in there going, I don't care about anything, but if I cannot get myself right this time, there's no hope for me. So I went in there to really, I want to figure out what's going on with me. I need to figure out what's going on with me. And I would say that I've watched a lot of lives be changed there for the good. I also seen a lot of harm being done, especially I was brought in front, and they did an exorcism on me because of practicing ceremony. And things have changed now, but we hold on to those things, right? I graduated there, and about 6 months later, one of the staff members started pursuing me. And I didn't have time for that. I was trying to get my kids back, trying to get a job, trying to live life. I stopped speaking with that person. And ended up going to a concert downtown with some friends, and that person happened to be there. And I got a check in my spirit, and I didn't listen. He ended up beating me, kidnapping me, and holding me in a house in South Minneapolis for about 10 hours. And I got out at one time. And I was running down the street, naked and beaten, and I seen a car come up. And I remember thinking in my head, thank God, I'm going to be okay. And the car drove around me and kept driving. And he then pulled me back in. I was able to get out, and I was able to get back to my kids. What the state did with that afterwards is horrific. We actually shared a probation officer, And because he was also a student at Teen Challenge before he became a staff person. At that time, everybody that went to Teen Challenge, they gave him the same probation officer. And a few days after I'd gotten out of the hospital and I was at my mentor's house, she calls and she said, I heard something happened. And I was like, yeah. And I figured that the police had contacted, and she said, well, I just want you to know, Christians don't press charges. And so it went on from there. And so you can imagine everything that I built up, I now shoved it away and said, I need to survive. I just need to survive this. And I disassociated from it, and I tried to move on, and I tried to build my life. Something about trauma that you don't deal with, it continues to come up in ways that don't even feel connected. In 2011, I relapsed. I was in another horrific domestic abuse situation, and I needed to get out, and I could not take the pain anymore. And I relapsed for about 3 months, and I got another charge, and I begged them to let me go to, there is called a Native American treatment center in South Dakota, and I begged them to let me go there. And I was able to go there after serving my time, and connected with my elder, and went into a Nibe and started to find my healing. Started to find out who I was, and what was mine, and what was the ancestors, and that they would take care of it. It's not been easy. And at that time, even after I left Teen Challenge, I started organizing around doing organizing work, right? Like, worked with courts, worked with people to try to get diversion programs in Minnesota. And it was pretty successful at that. And again, but life, right? But life takes us out of those spaces because we have colonized organizing, where it's, here's organizing, here's my life, here's my family, here's my job. And if we look back, that's not what it's about. Organizing is our life. We organize with the people, with our families, with our tribes, our communities, because we need that support in all of our life, right? When I say that I'm an incarceration survivor, I like to bring the fact that there was never a prison on this land until white people came here. What did they do? How did, and we're talking about not just here, but in any indigenous land, there were not prisons. This is a new concept.
Thank the Quakers. Thank the Quakers.
We can thank white supremacy, I would like to say, in breaking off from community. It's my journey of organizing, of healing. It all comes into one, of finding my roots. It's all connected, right? When I started organizing pretty heavily in the Twin Cities area, it was a lot about police brutality. And we had so many things happening, so much different organizing around it, about prison abolition and trying to do these things, and so much harm was done. And it hurts because I'm looking for community, right? I'm gonna have you guys connect with somebody next to you, and we're just gonna, I have a couple questions that I want you guys just to think about. A time when you've been organizing or you've been in a space where you felt empowered, and a time that you felt like no power. And you just want to take 5 minutes to do that. You can connect with your neighbor or somebody else. talk a little bit about their bad experience?
As I said earlier, both my grandfather and my father died by suicide. I have survived two, suicide survivor times two. And one of the things that I was sharing with Bill, got it one. One of those I was sharing with Bill about the disempowerment of that experience is that once that label was decided, how the medical community then responded to me. So I've been on 72-hour hold in just my underwear in time space. I could just do that and touch the walls, right? With a nurse every 15 minutes shining a light in my eyes because I was a suicide risk. And so I had to endure that, and that was for my betterment, right? This was healing that was supposed to help. but this is healing that was hurting me, right? So I've had the opportunity to be housed in 3 different psychiatric units. And the thing there was that my sense of self, when I tell a doctor that the drugs you've just given me cause my hands to shake, they give me diarrhea, just going on this litany, looks back at me and says, well, just stay with it. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay to tell that to a person because they're mentally ill. We know better for you than you know for yourself. All right. And so the concept that I had as a graduate school graduate was that my mind, the very thing that I leaned on to reason, to make decisions, was now sick. So I had no way to check inside myself whether this is fair or not, or good or not, because the very thing was the thing that was ill. And as a consequence of that, it was absolutely fine for doctors, psychiatrists to prescribe me literally medication. That doesn't work, let's try these. Let's try these. And this is it. It got to a point where my wife came to see me, and my wife and I, she's a diva, and when I see my wife dressed in certain ways, heels and all that, I would say certain things to my wife. Okay. So she walks into the unit, and I just was like this. And she said, I had no feeling. I wrote no poetry. I did not read my Bible. I did not talk to anybody. All the things that I'm not, right? And so my wife had to go in there and raise holy hell to get me off those medications that basically, as far as the doctors are concerned, he's not manic and he's not depressed. We won. But the actual human being, who is more than all that, who has all of these different things that they do and like to do, is now shut off. And you think, not you, but they think, that is totally acceptable to do to a human being because they happen to be mentally ill or have that bipolar thing. As a consequence of that, it's been my struggles, like you, and resonate with a lot of what you said, to fight against this idea of cheap hope and resilience. Cheap hope and resilience, right? Because for us, there's no such thing as hope. There's no such thing that's just going to get better. It's for life. It's like diabetes, right? You're not going to get better. It's not going to be better around the corner for you. You live with. The second thing that's dangerous is the whole idea of resilience, where you say, you're able to bounce back in a difficult situation. Well, as you have shared, people involved who get beat up domestically stay in relationships that are bad for them too long. Resilience. Bounce back every time, right? And so my sense of being an advocate in sectors of the mentally ill community is to really stand up to say to doctors and to others, your hope is hurting us. Why? Because you think the next best thing is around the corner. Here are these pills. And it doesn't work, the next best thing. And you deny when you say to you, this is hurting me. I'm the one with the diarrhea. I'm the one with the shaking hands. Right? I'm the one who can't sleep. Right? Totally dismiss that because they know better. So that's the disempowering thing about having a bipolar diagnosis.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have either good or bad?
I just wanted to share kind of the resonances that Lily and I have between 2 different organizations that we've been involved with that had values that we felt closely identified with, and yet the practice of the organizing felt was extracting labor from us as opposed to practicing those values and being able to organize in a way that felt energizing or nourishing. Instead, you just become a list of what you can accomplish for the organization. and it just becomes another job that feels exploitive in some way, even though it's for a goal that we deeply believe in. And so our positive experiences were times where we felt we were still organizing for that world to come that we're building, but we were able to show up in ways that felt fully human and in ways that felt like, just go back to this word, energizing. It's giving us some momentum to carry forward instead of being draining and leading to burnout.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to?
It's negative again, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I recently went to a class about cultural competency for midwives. It was taught by two white women, both college educated, one with a PhD, and they called us super whitey for 3 hours. That's all I have to say. That was not positive or helpful. I'm not kidding, super whitey. They said that about a dozen times. You're all super whitey.
Well,
so there.
That's an example. Go ahead.
Kind of going off of that, this is kind of like similar to the organization stuff, but going into like the campaign world. Marie and I have both experienced just like being young organizers on political campaigns that, you know, claim like, hey, we want to empower young women of color, like, we believe in you, you are the leaders of today, and blah, 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 and just like completely exploiting our labor, completely not supporting us, you know, like driving us into just like deep depression where we feel like we went into a space that we really felt like we were going to be empowered in, and then took away any power that we felt we already had. To the point where like we're both like, oh, we can't work on campaigns for a while because we have to heal from this trauma. And so, you know, these movements are losing people because we are so hurt by the people leading them, because there's not enough intention put into like, what is this leadership, how do we make things sustainable, how do we make sure that people are taking care of ourselves, and that is a goal, and not just getting a person elected and not caring what happens to people involved.
Thank you. We'll take one more.
I just thought I'd offer a little more positive. Not that I don't resonate with everything, and it's all real. So I'm not a formally trained organizer, and I've not been paid to organize, which is probably why I have the positive. Sorry, but I did at my daughter's daycare. The student population was very so-called diverse, a word that I hate, by the way, but anyway.
I join you.
The staff, however, was entirely white. And in the beginning, I thought I was alone, so I thought this was important. The last what you were saying, actually, in the beginning. So I thought it was just me, because like, we always think it's just us, right? Yeah. We're the outlier. And so I didn't say anything the first couple of years. And my daughter already noticed, because I know you all know, because I noticed at 18 months that none of her teachers looked like her. And so even though I selected very carefully, my husband and I selected data very carefully. So through relationships with the other parents, I finally figured out that I could ask other parents, have you noticed? Okay, like, am I the only one? And so we did successfully launch an investigation. The EEOC launched an investigation on the hiring practices of the daycare, and they did identify very concrete policies that they could very easily change, which any of us could have probably told them, by the way, but some of us are lawyers that wouldn't have been heard in the same way. So they did, it was mandated, and it's state-funded daycare indirectly, but they had to change all of their hiring, recruitment, and retention and training policies. And by the time all that was finished, my child left, but I had said from the beginning that it really wasn't about her, it was about the institution and all the other kids, including the white kids who are seeing authority only in white leaders. Yeah. So.
Awesome. Congratulations. So isn't it ironic that we are out here fighting for a new world, but it's organizing and perpetuating the same systems that we are fighting against. In my own story, in my own journey of healing, around the same time that Philando was killed, there started to be a change within myself, and I started noticing and really being able to connect with the trauma that I experienced from being, not only being incarcerated, but being back in the community after being incarcerated, which I call reentry trauma.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to look at, everybody has childhood trauma, right? And we can see that, we can connect that with that, we can, oh, you know, that is terrible, and I can see how you got to be incarcerated. We as organizers can even look at incarceration and really be like, that's traumatic. That's state violence, right? Like that is violence by the state, and how could they do this to our people? But when people get out, where are the people welcoming people home? Where is the space for formerly incarcerated people to heal? Where's the space for us to be able to understand that they're going to feel like they don't have roots, where they don't have community? Are we giving them that space, or are we just congratulating the people that are successful? Because I know that for myself, I struggled so hard to be able to get a job, to be able to find a home for my boys and myself, to try to get my boys back, that just living was a success. Just not going back to prison was a success. Not standing in front of people, not sitting in front of people here, but we have our brothers and sisters, our daughters, our sons, our friends are coming back into the community every day, and we are just using them for their labor, just the same as the state is when we're talking about, let's come and organize, come and organize. And so I started going through my own journey of being able, oh my gosh, this is trauma. This is reentry trauma. This is why I feel like this. Even after all of the successes that I have, I still wake up every morning in the pit of my stomach with a knot that you're going to lose your babies. Everybody's going to find out that you deserve to be in prison. Every day, that's deep inside of me. I don't know if it will ever go away. But what I do know is that I'm able to talk about it now, to be able to find not just my healing, but hopefully other people that are experiencing it can just hear, oh my gosh, that's what that is. Give name to it. When Yanez was found not guilty, I went through almost a spiritual experience, because I was there at the occupation with River, he was 2 at the time, tied to my back, marching, doing the things, going to the meetings, doing all of this, doing prison abolition work, doing all this, doom. And it came back, and usually I am like, burn it down, let's get out there. And it was like the life force was sucked out of me. And I sat there, and I did go and march because a youth asked me to be there with them. And I went there, but I was almost out of body. And I watched the state and the police a safe distance away through that entire time. I watched us march, and people give their life and soul and spirit and all of their energy into fighting for justice, something that we couldn't even define if asked. What are we fighting for? Justice? What does that mean? If we don't know what that means, how can we fight for it? How can we demand justice when we don't know what that means? Does that mean that justice should have happened, that Yanez should have went to prison? Would that have made everything better?
No.
At that time, I just went back and I said, you know what, this is so much bigger. They know that we're not going to win this. They know that we're continuing to put in, we're a part of the system. Whether we like it or not, we're holding up the same system. And let's say we burned it down. Today, burn down. Tomorrow, what's going to happen? Are we ready for it?
Yep.
Are we ready for it? What would come in its place? Because I see in organizing spaces the same oppression, the same harm, The same systems played out continuously, the same people. How in the hell are people walking away with so much trauma when they're fighting for a new world that is what? What does that mean? What does that even mean? At that time, I decided, you know what, I'm going to focus 90% of my life on building this new world. 10% on burn it down, right? But part of building that is building people, right? Building spaces where people can grow, where they can heal, where they can fuck up and not be blasted out. Because even within our circles of trying to keep places safe, we are not confronting, I'm flawed, right? So I do restorative justice, we don't know what justice is, restorative practices, circle keeping. Within this colonized way of circle keeping, there is a victim and there's an offender. And I can't get down with that because I've offended and I've been the victim. And if we're not coming around both of those people to support them in change and accountability and healing, that's not the new world that I want. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to worry that people have an issue with me and they build a case before they come and talk to me and then I'm outed. I mess up every single day. Every single day. And I expect my community to want me to grow and want me to change and evolve enough to where they're going to, hey, I see this happening. How can we support you? What can we do? Because we don't want you to continue to harm in our community, in our tribe, in our families. If you don't make it, I don't make it. And that's not to say that there's not people that need to have a timeout, right? Like you need to go do your thing over there. We need some help. We've come to you numerous times. We've offered accountability. We've done all those things, and you continue to do harm. And then we need to take care of our people, right? But I don't want, if we're not doing this for transformative justice, right? Like transformative, not just restorative, because I haven't ever been to a place of wholeness. And our community hasn't seen wholeness in a hell of a long time, if ever. So how can we restore something that was never there? But we can be transformative. We can do those things. And that's what I focus on now. I can tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing now and the vision that I have right now. So I am the interim executive director for the Minnesota Freedom Fund. So we bail people out of jail. And we are working on policy work now to end cash bail system.
Yes.
First in Hennepin County and then hopefully statewide. And so I say that the volunteers, the jail disruptors, were able to kick down those walls. We have one of the most amazing jail disruptors right here, which we couldn't do the work without the volunteers that are able to go post bail. And it's amazing. It is amazing to know that we not just do it for criminal bonds, but we also do it for immigration bonds. And that work is something that is direct action. And we see direct results. We're able to get people out that day. And they're able to go back to their families. And so I really believe in that. I also work with the American Indian Prison Project Working Group, also very near and dear to my heart. And with that, I'm working on the Rising Phoenix Initiative, and it's to build a diversion program for Native women. In Minneapolis, Native women are stopped, arrested, detained more than any other people. Indigenous women make up less than 1% of the population in Minnesota, but we are 25% of the population in the prison systems and in the jail systems. And if people don't realize that this is genocide, against our women, they have blinders on, and no one's talking about it. So I scream it from the rooftops. I go to every DOC meeting that I can and be like, what about, I work with the Minnesota Prison Doula Project.
Yes.
And so we support women and birthing people who are behind bars in 7 different facilities in Minnesota. And we also offer pregnancy beyond classes. We offer parenting behind bars. We offer peer-to-peer support and also supervised visits. And so we're able to do those. All of those are happening in one county. The prison doesn't let us, they don't fund us and don't help us, so we have to raise money, and we haven't been able to raise money for the classes there for probably 6 months now. Hennepin County doesn't allow us in there. And so those are other things I'm pushing for. My baby is We Rise Leadership Collective. It's a collective of formerly incarcerated women and non-gender binary people who have been incarcerated that are looking to do systems and policy changes. The way that we are going to do that, and the way that we do that, is restorative, transformative, and healing. The way that we organize, it has to be that way. That's why it's a collective. There's not one leader. Everybody has knowledge. Everyone has so much wisdom. And one of the biggest initiatives in my driving force is we are going to end incarceration for pregnant women. And that's going to happen nationwide, and it's going to start here. And that's going to happen within the next 5 years.
Yes.
And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care. We will talk with lawmakers. We will do all of those things. And I'll try to do it the right way. But I know where they live. And I don't mind going to places and camping out. We can change this, right? Like, if we can't get down how we are going to treat the people that we are trying to build a new world with, who are we to talk about the system? Who are we to blame the system when we're perpetuating that same system, right? One of the most empowering, there's a couple of times that I want to talk about my empowering organizings, and Ben reminded me of one of the most healing times. One of the women on the collective was a domestic abuse survivor, and she was attacked by her abuser, single mom. She had 4 children sleeping upstairs. The abuser broke in through her window at 3 o'clock in the morning, attacked her. In her defense, he was stabbed. He was killed, or he died at the hospital because they hit a main artery when they were trying to staple his heart. She was charged and convicted of 2nd-degree murder, pregnant at the time. She ended up filing an appeal and won an appeal. When she got out, she was recharged. And so I met with her 3 months after she got out, and we're like, hey, you're out finally. Like, that's great. And I'm like, are they charging you again? She said, yeah, I have to go to trial. And at that time, I was like, oh no. Like, do you want help? Do you want us to come around you and support and do? She's like, anything that you can do, because she didn't have anybody during that time.
How long did she spend incarcerated before the appeal?
She was in there for 2 years total. 2 years. So she gave birth, and 36 hours later, they took her baby, which happens at standard practice. And one of the stories that's very heart-wrenching, she talks about, and she's given me permission to say part of this, is when she got back after giving birth, and this is also standard practice, they do a cavity search 36 hours after birth. And our women are mocked and made to clean up any mess. And so that's happening in Minnesota today, right? So I put a call out for help to fight against Natalie's case and to bring awareness. And we ended up with 70,000 signatures. We organized an action, and let me tell you, I was working a full-time job as a construction project manager, then working until 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get national support ticket and doing all the things, and I was exhausted by the day that we came to do the action. And we ended up outside of John Choi's office, and Natalie was a part of a choir on the inside. And that choir that's on the outside, they have like a sister organization on the outside, was there, and they sang the songs, and Natalie came up and sang with us. And then we proceeded to go into John Choi's office and asked to speak with him and to give him the petition. He refused, obviously, wouldn't come down. And I don't know if you've been in John Choi's office, but it's not, the lobby is not big. We ended up with how many people?
It was packed.
It was packed, and we had a wall to wall. We had a brass band. And we had a dance party where people sang, danced, cried, laughed for a couple hours until they came and kicked us out, tried to push us out. And that's what it should be about, right? Because she ended up taking a plea bargain, which she had to do for her. That was her choice, and I understand completely. She did not do any more time. But what she does have, and what she can take away with that, is feeling community and in that collective healing inside that space, right? And that's what it can be. Those are the things that it can be. When we come together, the power that we have, when it's a spiritual experience. It can be a spiritual experience where it's just like generations of healing happening in this one space. Generations of healing. You know, that's kind of something that's my theme right now in my life is generational healing. And I'm just going to touch on this a little bit, and I think we're probably getting close to time. My grandfather. This is probably the first time that I've referred to him as my grandfather. But he is my ancestor also. And I've been doing a lot of work on how to heal generational and ancestral healing, because I came into this world to do that work because I have this child who is going to change the world. And that's what my job is here right now, is to, how can I heal what's back there so I'm not putting that onto my children now, right? How do I do that? And how do I connect with someone that's done so much harm and wasn't a nice person to a lot of people, but ask them to work with me in this world right now? It's been, like, this is the damn thing about healing. Just when you think that you're healed, you're getting another fucking layer. Shit happens. And it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I can't, there's no way. Like, I'm doing just fine. I don't need to connect with that. It's good. But dang it, here I am calling him my grandfather and working with him and asking him to work with me to do the work that I'm here to do right now, right? Part of an organization called, it's the National Council on Formerly and Incarcerated Women and Girls. We're doing work nationally to do a lot of changing. One of the things we're doing is trying to bring the primary caregiver bill to every state, which would require the judge to do, they say, community sentencing, which that's the language you have to use, which it sounds very punitive, you know, sentencing, but we can't use alternatives because you give them too much leeway then. And that will, in Minnesota, will be revolutionary because in other places it doesn't include pregnant women. I have a home right now that I'm looking to turn that into a place for pregnant women to go instead of incarceration. Is one of the things that is coming up, and there's a lot of really good things. There's a lot of good things that are happening right now, and if we can come together and build coalitions of spaces where people are finding that healing, while we're working on issues to try to change the world and change the system, that's what I think that it's really about, right? It doesn't need to hurt to organize for a good world. We have a lot of things that need to be cleared up and setting up for that, right? When we look at, like, We look at other organizations. We look at the Black Panther Party. We look at AIM. We look at Standing Rock. And we look at, analyze what happened. Well, there's a big movement. There's an energy shift that's coming and that's happening that we have to start to prepare for that now and lay the groundwork of how we are going to treat our own people. How are we going to handle issues that come up of harm, of pain, of trauma? How are we going to handle them? How are we going to work to heal them? How are we going to take a pause from the bigger issue to make sure our people are okay? Because I'm not going to continue to perpetuate harm because I have a goal. Well, if the goal isn't about healing, it's not a goal, right? It's just, we're just as fucked as the system. That's all I got.
But I think also it's important for us as we start to envision this, whatever this is, to not fall into the trap of being so system-minded that we're not people good. Because systems don't bleed like statistics, right? Capitalism is capitalism because they're capitalist people. Right? And so I think our thinking and our organizing needs to be aimed personally as opposed to systems. Because systems don't care. They perpetuate. It's the people in those systems that are able to do things. And it's them that need to be interrupted. It's them that need to be shaken.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions or anything that they would like to say? Like I said, there's a lot of wisdom here. Yeah, Marie.
I just recently was at a talk with James Lowe, and he has a welcoming kind of idea for people reentry after incarceration. So check out James Lowe.
Yeah, James is a dear friend. He's an amazing, amazing human being doing really good work. Yes.
So, if you filled out an envelope and made a contribution to, that was very loud, wasn't it? Not the first time I've heard that. If you've made a contribution to Kaleo, please make a matching contribution to the Prison Doula Project. And if you can only do one, make a contribution to the Prison Doula Project. And can you tell us how to do that?
Yeah, so you can go onto the website and you can do that there, or you can, if you want to check or cash and you want to give that to Liz and she can pass it on to us, that's great. Again, just to say we are not funded by the state, so it's all individual and grants that we're doing to try to support women throughout Minnesota. We also have started another sister organization in Alabama at Tutwiler Prison, which is the most dangerous prison, women's prison in the United States. We've been able to change things there, and now they have a nursing program, nurse breastfeeding program, right? So the women who give birth are able to pump and send out milk. And so their program's a little bit different because the warden there said, we are going to bring this into our prison. Different here because the warden here tries to kick us out every day. So yeah, any support, that would be amazing. Amazing. So I appreciate everybody. I'll be here for a little while if you want to stop and say hi. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.